Winter in the Blood is the debut novel of James Welch. It was published by Harper & Row Native American Publishing Program in 1974. Set on the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation in north-central Montana during the late 1960s, Winter in the Blood follows a nameless Blackfeet and Gross Venter on and man's episodic journey to piece together his fragmented identity. Welch received praise from such luminaries as Pulitzer Prize-winning Ojibwe author Louise Erdrich, celebrated American novelist Reynolds Price, and Coeur d'Alene author Sherman Alexie. Alexie later produced the film adaptation of the novel, which was released in 2012. James Philip Welch, Jr. November 18, 1940 – August 4, 2003, who grew up within the Blackfeet and cultures of his parents, was a Native American novelist and poet, one considered a founding author of the Native American Renaissance. His novel Fool's Crow 1986 received several national literary awards, and his debut novel Winter in the Blood 1974 was adapted as a film by the same name, released in 2013. Summary. The novel features a self-destructive narrator undergoing an identity crisis. After getting into a bar fight with a white man, the narrator comes home drunk to discover that his girlfriend, Agnes, has disappeared with his electric razor and gun. The narrator travels to Malta, Montana to track her down, where he meets a white nameless, airplane man, from New York heading out west. He meets the airplane man again when he travels to Havre, Montana, where the man tries to convince the narrator to take him across the border to Calgary in an attempt to escape from the FBI. While the man buys a hunting knife and an old Ford Falcon, the narrator sees Agnes and her brother Dougie in the street. Later that night, the narrator finds Agnes in a bar and tries to talk to her, but Dougie and his friends beat him up. As the narrator leaves the bar, he sees the airplane man being arrested. The narrator hitchhikes home and discovers that his grandmother has passed away. The next day he, Teresa, and Lame Bull dig a grave for her. While digging, the narrative flashes back to a memory of the narrator and his brother Mose herding cattle, which results in Mose's death. Once the grave is finished, the narrator leaves to visit Yellow Calf, who talks about the narrator's grandmother. She was the youngest wife of Sitting Bear, from the Blackfeet tribe. The tribe survives starvation and a military assault during which Sitting Bear is killed. The Blackfeet turn on the grandmother, and Yellow Calf helps her survive. The narrator then realizes that Yellow Calf is his grandfather. The next day, with the help of Teresa and Lame Bull, the narrator buries his grandmother. He ponders the future and resolves to work things out with Agnes. The narrator, a self-destructive, unnamed protagonist living with his mother and grandmother. He believes himself to be Blackfeet and Gross Venter. The narrator is disconnected from his ancestry and is a servant to a memory of death, seventh due to unresolved trauma from the death of his father and older brother. First Rays, the narrator's father, from whom the narrator gets his connection to Fort Belknap. He froze to death in a barrow pit. Teresa, the narrator's Blackfeet and Catholic mother. She is married to Lame Bull after being widowed by her first husband, John First Rays. She is described as never having been beautiful, but a woman who had grown handsome, with a stout body. A proprietor of good land, Teresa is financially stable and was wealthier partner from both her marriages. Her first marriage was an unhappy one, and she describes her former husband as a foolish man. Teresa owns the ranch they live on and has a large expanse of good land and cattle. Airplane Man, a flighty, white man the narrator meets after leaving Fort Belknap. Together they spend time together drinking and loitering around the airport. The airplane man is representative of the American, or white, world that the narrator is a part of, but also alienated from. Agnes, the narrator's girlfriend. She is a Cree woman from Havre who's scorned by the reservation people, and is believed to be married to the narrator. The narrator's grandmother harbors negative feelings toward Agnes because she is Cree. She only makes brief appearances in the novel, but her theft of the narrator's gun and electric razor engenders his journey. She is later found accompanied by her brother, Dougie. Mose, the narrator's older brother. He died at the age of 14 after being hit by a car while herding cattle. Yellow Calf, a member of the Blackfeet tribe whom the narrator meets after burying his grandmother. He is a blind and old. In his youth he helped the narrator's grandmother survive when her tribe ostracized her. The narrator discovers that Yellow Calf is his grandfather. The grandmother, an old Blackfeet woman and the narrator's grandmother. She is blind and does not speak throughout the novel. Welch writes of her dislike of Agnes because she is Cree. Given that Agnes is Cree, the grandmother believes that she is a kind of bad luck charm and internally shames the narrator for having married her. She dies before the narrator returns from Havre. The narrator moves in and out of the boundaries separating one part of his identity from the other. Paula Gunn Allen identifies Welch's work as one of many Native American fictional works to utilize opposing settings in a way that which indicate the pervasiveness of alienation as a continuing theme in American Indian writing. Themes. Alienation. Following an increase in the number of indigenous authors and literature published in the 1970s and 1980s during the Native American Renaissance, Native American literature as a genre diverged from preceding Native American works with the thematic inclusion of alienation. 8. Paula Gunn Allen details the prevalence of alienation in contemporaneous Native American poetry and prose as an experience of the single individual. It is a primary experience of all bicultural American Indians in the United States and, to one extent or another, this includes virtually every American Indian. According to Allen, the unnamed narrator endures a lifetime of alienation due to his lack of a clear sense of belonging to a people, a tradition, or a culture, resulting in a deeply fractured sense of self, showing both the degree of his lack of power and the extent of his self-estrangement. Fragmented identity. Random House notes how Welch obscures the narrator's identity to emphasize his disconnection to his family and the outside world. The narrator says, "I felt no hatred, no love, no guilt, no conscience, nothing but a distance that had grown through the years," and proceeds to exist in an inebriated state throughout most of the novel, constantly reliving old memories. Allen states that the narrator is so out of touch with himself that his long-past relationships with his dead brother and father have more meaning for him than any of his contemporary ones, and he is adrift in a life that lacks shape, goal, understanding, or significance. Andrew Horton argues that the narrator is separated between two perspectives and two worlds, which explains why the narrator is never named and why the plot is told in nonlinear or episodic fashion. Welch has explained that his intention with the episodic narration was to create a circle. The plot of the book continued around until the story came back to the same area at the end of the book as the beginning. According to Professor William Bill Bevins, the narrator's relationships with various characters throughout the novel also embody opposing realities. Though Welch has gainsaid autobiographical connections in his works, Horton notes that Welch's existence between two tribes made him straddle the line between those two worlds, a circumstance which Welch experienced with a uniquely disillusioned perspective. Kathleen M. Sands describes the narrator as someone who is ineffective in relationships with people and at odds with his environment, not because he is deliberately rebellious, or even immaturely selfish, but because he has lost the story of who he is, where he has come from. Recovery. Allen observes that the nameless narrator carries physical injuries and emotional trauma engendered by the death of his brother and father. Lewis Owens writes that, without an identity, the narrator is frozen in time, caught up in a wintry dormancy as he moves tentatively and tortuously toward a glimmer of self-knowledge. As he travels to find Agnes, the narrator undergoes an abstract recovery. Owens states that, following the momentary response to life, the narrator begins to recount the events leading to his brother's death, and relives memories of his deceased father, first rays. The narrator's statement, "It was beginning to get light," signals a movement towards healing, according to Owens. The novel continues a pattern of having traumatic triggers engender moments of reflective recovery with the wild-eyed cow, Agnes, Marlene, Malvina, and Bird all contribute to the narrator's repeated regressions and violent outbursts. Owens writes, as he has moved toward full remembrance of Moses' death, which took place when the narrator was 12, he has been regressing toward childhood. In order to come to terms with his brother's death and his own guilt, he must go back and begin again from that moment. His final moment of recovery, as represented in his conversation with Yellow Calf, is precipitated by memories of previous confrontations and relivings of past events. Owen states that, the narrator's rebirth and reawakening, such as it is, comes to fruition in this scene as he says, "Some people, I thought, will never know how pleasant it is to be distant in a clean rain, the driving rain of a summer storm. It's not like you'd expect, nothing like you'd expect." Assimilation. Jennifer K. Davis analyzes the shifting settings of Winter in the Blood in relation to the novel's preoccupation with assimilation and identity. Winter in the Blood explores both themes through the narrator's journey towards the rediscovery of his Blackfeet heritage. Davis's dissertation analyzes the novel's deviation from other Native American literature in which the main character simply returns to his or her native culture and leaves the white world behind. Return or assimilation represents a way of resolving a psychological crisis, but they modify these traditional patterns for modern and specific personal needs. In Davis's understanding, the novel follows the narrator as he navigates between assimilation and alienation. She states, "It is even more important that they feel a part of the culture to which they choose to belong, i.e., they are not alienated." Detail summary. Part 1. Montana in the summer warmth of the 1960s. The unnamed narrator is 32 and a member of the Blackfeet tribe. As the story commences, he is arriving home drunk from a bar in which he just came into physical conflict with a white man. His home is a cattle ranch shared with his mother and her mother. For the past 3 weeks his girlfriend Agnes, a member of the Cree tribe, has also called the ranch her home. But now she's take a powder, along with his electric razor and his gun. A few days later, the narrator's mother, Teresa, announces that she and her boyfriend Lame Bull have gotten hitched. When Lame Bull is helping out with chores around the ranch, he tells the narrator about the day he drowned some ducks he'd won at the fair, purely by accident, and how his father froze to death after getting drunk one night 10 years earlier. Then Lame Bull hires a man named Raymond Longknife to help out on the ranch, but a payment dispute results in an altercation and with a sock to the nose, Raymond is escorted off the ranch. Despite suggesting that it is hardly worth the effort, the narrator heads to the nearby town of Malta to track down to Agnes. Once there, he comes across her brother, Dougie, drinking in a bar, and before too long the two of them are making plans to roll a white patron so deep in the drink he's passed out cold. The night stretches out to include a meeting with a strange man from New York who left his wife and instead of flying to the Middle East decided to drive to the Midwest. The next morning begin with a hangover and the realization that a barmaid he seemed to recognize was actually in his hotel with him overnight. Part 2. The narrator takes a ride on a horse named Bird for a visit with a man who can't see. He and Yellow Shack come to a profound agreement: the world is cockeyed. Later he tags along with Lame Bull and narrator over to Harlem where he meets a girl named Malvina in a bar. The next morning he wakes up on Malvina's sofa, but is driven away after making a pass at her. Next on his travel agenda is Havre where he has heard Agnes may be staying. Instead, he runs into the same strange man from New York who is now convinced that the senior citizen at the bar is furtively listening in on his conversations. Turns out, the old man is actually, literally, the sitting dead. Taking the mysterious man up on his offer to meet later at the Legion Club, he watches in bemusement as the guy wins chocolate and toys as prizes in games of chance. He asks the narrator to come along with him to Calgary with the enticement of being able to keep the car on his solo trip him. Apparently, Canada is the central element in his plan to escape the clutches of the FBI. As they walk through Havre, the man purchases a hunting knife and an old Ford Falcon. While in the Falcon, he sees Agnes in the street with her brother. The plan to head to Canada at midnight is preceded by a walk past a movie theater airing an old western. The film stimulates a flashback to a day 20 years previous when a 12-year-old narrator and his 14-year-old brother Mose were sent by their dad to bring in the cows. Back in the present, he finally tracks down Agnes in a bar, but Dougie gets some buds to give the narrator a beating. A girl named Marlene helps him up off the street and into a bar for a whiskey. While there he witnesses the mysterious man from NYC get arrested. Marlene spend the night together in a hotel before he decides to get the heck out of Havre. Part 3. Hitchhiking his way back home, the narrator gets a ride from a man in an Olds, but nobody is home when he finally arrives. When he cannot even find his grandmother who never leaves, he figures she must have passed away while he was gone and is soon proven correct upon the return of Teresa and Lame Bull. The next day they set to work digging her grave. The death of his grandmother prompts a return to the flashback to the memory of him and Mose herding the cattle. The thing is, as dark was drawing over them, they were trying to move the cows across the highway, and when a calf broke from the herd and Bird gave chase, Mose got hit by a car and died. After they finish digging the grave, he sets off to see Yellow Calf again. Part 4. The conversation with Yellow Calf revolves around the narrator's recently deceased grandmother. Yellow Calf recalls when she was the youngest wife of Standing Bear and how they were forced to flee the onslaught of the soldiers after a winter with almost no food. Standing Bear wound up getting killed in a battle, and this resulted in the members of the Blackfeet turning on his grandmother and leaving her to starve to death, which she would have if it for Yellow Calf secretly getting food to her. Only at this point does the narrator realize that Yellow Calf is actually his grandfather. When he returns to the ranch, the narrator tries to free a cow that has gotten itself stuck in the mud. Eventually, he succeeds, but at the cost of the life of Bird, his horse. Epilogue. The next day they bury the narrator's grandmother as he starts focusing on his future. Those plans just may very well include marrying Agnes, he figures. Update this section. You can help us out by revising, improving and updating this section.